And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live from very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly and permanently ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. And I've got a bit of a special treat for you. Well, I mean, it's a special treat if you're listening on the Independence Network. Today, I'm going to play the complete interview with Rod Miller. I've been telling you for a while that we're going to do this, and yesterday we finally were able to hook up and sit down and visit for a little bit. So the plan for today's program is we're going to do about 15 minutes of the live show, and then we're going to switch over to listen to the Rod Miller interview. It runs about 45 minutes long, and our main topic of discussion is Title 22. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, in Wyoming, that's our section of statute that governs elections. And there's a big chunk of it that specifically relates to political parties, because those people in the legislature, the redcoats, thought that that was a good opportunity to be able to influence Wyoming elections. They started monkeying around with Title 22 and telling political parties, well, specifically two political parties, well, really just one political party, how they had to run things. And that way, maybe they could have some sort of control over the outcome of elections. And that's exactly what they did. And so in Title 22, there's a whole bunch of stuff that tells a private corporation, and make no mistake, both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are private entities. They're no different than the Kiwanis Club or the Shriners or your local Masons Club or whatever. They pretty much operate the same way. The only difference being that a political party has candidates for higher public office. Well, Title 22 tells political parties how to manage their internal affairs, how they elect officers, how they run internal elections, how representatives of the electorate get to be represented inside the party. There's a whole bunch of internal stuff in there that I completely disagree with. And interestingly enough, Rod Miller does also. And so we sat down and we had a discussion about it. Now, as you can imagine, Rod Miller and I disagree on a great many things, and we even disagree in the interview. There's one particularly memorable spot, and I think that you're going to get a real kick out of it, because I really do hold him to the fire and make him answer a question. Well, he doesn't answering it; he changes the subject, which is what a lot of people do when they know that they've been beat. But there's a couple of really enlightening sections in the interview, and so I think you're going to really enjoy it. So what we'll do is we're going to talk for about 15 minutes, well, actually 10 minutes, 30 seconds now, and then we're going to switch over and listen to the Rod Miller interview. So if you're watching on the Ditto Cam, if you want to continue listening to the Rod Miller interview, you're going to need to switch over to the Independence Network website, which is independencenetwork.us, and you can listen to it live. Or You can switch over to the podcast, which might be easier anyway. And that interview has already been uploaded on the podcast, and you can listen to the entire thing. But let's get some fun news in here. I was watching my Texas Rangers last night, and one of the reasons we haven't had a lot of baseball zen lately is there hasn't been a lot of baseball zen where the Texas Rangers are concerned. Well, last night they were hosting the New York Yankees in Arlington, down in Texas. And they lost the first game of a 3-game series. But last night, they beat the Yankees and in spectacular fashion. Here's what happened right at the end. Now, right before this soundbite, the Yankees were ahead 4-3 in bottom of the ninth with 2 outs. Here's what happened next.
Bases loaded to 3-2. Foul back. Langford seems to be keeping his cool pretty well here under pressure. Nearly 30,000 here, and they're up. Hoping for another Rangers walk-off. And that is good. The walk-off slam for Wyatt Langford.
Wow. Wyatt with a long home run last night in the 7th inning.
Oh, there you go. A walk-off grand slam in the bottom of the 9th inning from Wyatt Langford. A great end to what was actually a pretty good game. It was a pretty intense pitcher's duel for a while. And really, I mean, when it's concerning the New York Yankees and the Texas Rangers, a pretty low-scoring game. But in the end, my Rangers pulled it off, and it was a good night at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, or at Casa Iverson. So we can say that now since I'm married. Anyway, fun times. But let's get to some of the news here. And there's an article entitled, "The White House Falsely Claims That Grocery Prices Have Come Down Under the Biden Administration," while Harris revives the price gouging claim. Now, what they're trying to do here is have it both ways. So Harris can claim, well, I'm going to save the economy. I'm going to lower prices. While the Biden administration is trying to claim, well, no. You see, grocery prices have come down. And I quote, President Biden's chief spokesman falsely claimed Tuesday that grocery prices have come down recently, when federal data shows they cost 21.1% more than when Biden took office in 2021, including a persistent 1.1% bump over the past year. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre made the unfactual claim when asked by a reporter if Biden agrees with Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign trail argument that price gouging continues with groceries. Yes, we've talked about this, Jean-Pierre said at her regular briefing. Then she added, to be clear, and we're quoting here, we've seen grocery prices come down over the past year or more. And so that is important. And a lot of work has been done by this administration. That's not true at all. And everybody in America, if they're halfway honest with themselves, knows that. All you have to do is walk to the grocery store and you can see that grocery prices have not come down. And if you a while ago, that was several years ago when I still had stepkids. Well, I don't even know if you ever get rid of stepkids, but long time ago when the kiddos were in the house, the Obama administration was in office. And I told the kids, I'm like, well, let's chart the price of groceries. So we went to the store and we wrote down the prices and the sizes of bread and coffee. And I think we chose milk and butter. And it was amazing in just a couple of years how much prices had gone up. Well, with Obama gets out of office, Trump comes into office, and the prices go down because inflation was hovering a little bit above 1%. Now, to be fair, COVID hit and inflation went through the roof. But then it went back down. And when Biden took office, they started their massive government spending program, and inflation went through the roof again. So once again, the Biden administration just absolutely lying about everything. Now, if you're a Trump fan, you might like this next article. Pollsters like to look at historical data, and there's been a couple of them that were absolutely right in the 2016 and the 2020 election. And they already think that Vice President Harris is on her way down. In fact, the title of the article is "They Think Harris Has Lost Her Mojo." And I quote, "Most polls show Vice President Kamala Harris leading in the swing states that will decide the election. But two southern state pollsters are bucking the trend, and they've got former President Donald Trump up big." The polling by Insider Advantage and the Trafalgar Group in 7 battleground states finds Trump on a path to 296 electoral votes, suggesting that Harris has already lost her momentum. Matt Towery of the Insider Advantage poll found Trump ahead in Arizona, Nevada, and North Carolina, and down by 0.4% only in Georgia. He noted that both he and Robert Cahaly of the Trafalgar Group, which handled Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, were both in the top 3 pollsters in 2016 and the 2020 cycles because of their methodology allows them to pick up some Trump votes while some of the other pollsters might not be able to get them. To be sure, all of Trump's leads are narrow and within the margin of error, meaning the states could still very well go either way on Election Day. But Towery believes that Harris is stalling now that her novelty has worn off. Quote, "The momentum that we were seeing after the DNC has sort of come to an end," Towery said, "and surges in Democratic enthusiasm I've seen in polls after Harris replaced President Biden have also slowed and are now close to parity." See, and that's what I predicted was going to happen with Harris's polling numbers from the very beginning, that she would get a bump after the DNC, and she would get a slight bump after she chose a vice presidential candidate. Though I don't think that they expected the public backlash against Tim Walz. But I mean, let's be honest, it's Tim Walz, and backlash is kind of goes synonymous with his name. But I predicted that bump would last for a little bit, and then it would start to drop off when voters start to really dig into who these candidates are. And that's pretty much happened. And even on the Republican side, you'll see a little bit of bump after the convention. And then if you have a crappy candidate like I don't know, John McCain, you'll see it decline. That hasn't happened with President Trump. His popularity has remained pretty well high. But when you compare that to Kamala Harris, well, the DNC bump is over, and now the top polling organizations are predicting that Harris isn't going to win this one. Rightfully so, I might add. Now, I've only got about 2 minutes left, but there's an interesting article, and I guess we're going to have to cover it probably tomorrow. But it comes to us from The Blaze, and it's entitled, "Harris Has Kept Voters in the Dark About Her Plans for America. Democrats say her secrecy is a good thing." Now, let me just read you the first couple paragraphs, and then we'll pick this up on tomorrow's program. And I quote, "Kamala Harris has been less than forthcoming about what she would do if elected president. Democrats and her boosters in the liberal media apparently believe that when it comes to cluing Americans in on what exactly they might be voting for, less is more, and have now said so publicly. Although it has been several weeks since President Joe Biden was unceremoniously retired from the race, his replacement's campaign website remains devoid of any policy agenda. Rather than detail about what Harris stands for, the site merely notes where she stood, adding only, quote, "She will make sure the doors of opportunity are wide open for all to follow." I don't even know what that means. See, the only thing that's coming out of the Harris administration is platitudes, because frankly, that's the only thing the Democrats have. When you're left to defend a record such as the Biden-Harris administration, it's very, very unlikely that they're going to make any success in any sort of election. Well, we'll cover that in more detail first thing tomorrow morning. But for now, let's go ahead and switch over to the podcast or to the independencenetwork.us and listen to my interview with Rod Miller. Let me tell you why we do this every once in a while. Because Rod and I disagree on just about everything. But we can still sit down and have a pleasant discussion and talk about issues. And our hope is that if we can do it, You can do it. And maybe we can get to the heart of what's really troubling our state and our country. So for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson. Here is the interview with Rod Miller.